Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to our second segment of the day one for the ESG conference. And I can see you have been welcomed. You had some nice goodies, and I can see smiles are now coming up. Thank you so much for the smiles that I can see. And as we have started the conference, we were welcomed today with the CEO from the Institute of Directors Zimbabwe, Miss Catherine Nyachionjeka. And then we moved on to the setting the tone for the whole conference, what ESG is all about, what are we going to talk about as we are going into the environment of sustainability. We were taken into the key frameworks that are coming up with sustainability within our nation, which is Zimbabwe. And the CEO of the Institute of Sustainability in Africa, Mr. Rodney Ndamba, took us just before we break for lunch. And thank you so much for the presentations. And I can see from the questions that were coming up, it seems we are challenged. We are challenged on our professional duties that we do day in, day out. So right now, as we move to with our programs, with our program, we're going to the next segment. And the person who's coming right now is a chartered accountant in Zimbabwe with extensive experience in financial management, governance, and strategic leadership. She has worked across both the public and private sectors, driving excellence and financial reporting and promoting accountability and transparency. Passionate about professional development and ethical leadership, she continues to contribute to the growth of the accounting profession through mentorship and thought leadership. Her insights today will actually inspire you, as she will be coming from the regulator, which is the PAB. It will inspire innovation, integrity, and impact in the evolving landscape of sustainability. So as we move on to the next segment, I'm going to call upon Fungai Charumbira, a CA from the Public Accountants and Auditors Board.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I was wondering when Pascal was introducing me, and I was like, have I been moved on the program? Thank you so much for having me. Like Pascal said, my name is Fungai Charumbira from the Public Accountants and Auditors Board. I'm a technical manager there, responsible for education quality and development. So before I start, I'd like to just talk about PAB. My boss gave me strict instructions when I was coming here that you need to tell people about PAB, because I think we have some people who might not really know what PAB is all about. So PAB is the regulator of the accountancy profession in Zimbabwe. And in Zimbabwe, the accountancy profession includes accounting, auditing, as well as tax. So our responsibility as PAB is quite huge. Our main mandate is to protect the public interest. So this is to ensure that anyone who has a financial interest in Zimbabwe is protected by us, whether they're local or they're not from Zimbabwe. It is our duty to protect them. And we protect them through various functions that we have. Part of it is we look at the education standards of everyone who trains to be a tax accountant, a public accountant, or a public auditor. We also set standards, and I believe that is why we were invited, because we are the ones who are the national standard setters. we set the professional standards to be used in the country in terms of reporting. So through SI 41 of 2019, we have adopted the international standards on auditing, financial accounting, ethics, etc. So in the same vein, when the sustainability standards were introduced, we were one of the first countries to raise our hand to say we would like to adopt them. Because when we looked at the standards, they did solve a number of issues that are there in terms of our mandate of protecting the public interest, and we saw that they do provide adequate information to all the users of financial statements. I was talking to Dr. Ndidi from the ISSB, and she really inspired me because she said, as accountants, we believe we can change the world. And this is how we are going to change the world through sustainability. So, ESG covers a lot of things that you have already been told about. It covers environmental, social governance. There are so many issues to do with sustainability that touch on what we do on a day-to-day. It could be how much water you use brushing your teeth. It could be when you go and take that stick from the tree outside your house to beat your child if they've been naughty. It covers all those items. But for today, I'm going to be talking about climate resilience. So I'm not going to focus on all the other areas of ESG, but rather on climate. And I believe in Zimbabwe, this is something that we have to take very seriously, especially as businesses, because it has hit us quite hard. And I believe all of us have seen the effects. So when it comes to climate resilience, especially for our businesses, not just for our businesses, but even on an individual basis, our mindset is what is important. We have been, as a CA myself, we are trained to look out for risk. I remember when I was still training, there was always something we were told to watch out for. You always have to think what could go wrong. So when you get into a place, it's always what could go wrong. And I always have fights with my husband because when he's coming up with an idea, I'm always seeing what could go wrong. So for us, the mindset shift that we have to take is to look at the opportunities rather than to just put the risks and think about what could go wrong, what could go wrong. As Zimbabweans, I believe we are very good at this. Our businesses are very good at this. We all know this story. We are experts in this story. Currency issues in Zimbabwe. We came from the Zim dollar to the Vera check, to multi-currency, to bond notes, to RTGS dollar, to ZIG, but I believe we are now in multi-currency again. We have changed currencies so much that we are experts at it. I was watching a comedian and he was saying, in other countries, people don't know their finance minister or even what nostro is, but we are experts in that. We know what happens in the nostro accounts, and then the other banks that are outside the country, and then they need to be, we know all that. And I believe the reason that we have come to know about all of that is because we are trying to be agile. We want to stay ahead of the curve. We want to know the strategies to put in place to safeguard ourselves. So, as Zimbabweans, I think we should get the prize for people who can best adapt to anything. I know they put us in the top 10 of miserable people, but we adapt. We are agile. Any Zimbabwean that you see in another country, they are agile. Talk of our businesses even. I believe that some of the businesses that we have here in Zimbabwe, if they were going to go out there and work in a perfect economy, their performance would just balloon because we have mastered the art of working and making a difference and creating profits in a very volatile environment. So it's very important that as we are looking at this whole climate issues that are happening, we remember that it's about our mindset. And already we do have this mindset. So what are we talking about when we are talking about climate resilience? We all know about climate change, the things that are happening. I remember growing up, when we would go to the rural areas for the holidays, we would have maize, right? But it's not happening anymore. Those are already the signs of the changes that are coming through. So now climate resilience is now us adapting to these changes that are coming. Everything that is around us, for us to change such that we do not be affected by the adverse impacts of these climate changes that are happening. If anything, we should ride the wave of problems that are coming through as a result of climate change, and creating opportunities in the process. One interesting example would be, we all know the power shortages that Zimbabwe face, and I believe they are spreading to our friends down south as well. We have a shortage of water in the Charumbira Dam. That is an adverse impact of climate change. And because of that, when these things started and we were having power issues, when we would have load shedding, we would have no network. But Econet, for example, they started using generators. When electricity is gone, the automatic gen will turn on and it will sustain. But then as this has happened over a long period of time, they ended up using solar on their towers. That is a good example of climate resilience, where we realize the challenges that are being brought by climate change, and we innovate in order to deal with this and not experience the adverse effects. Some of the climate risks that are there can be categorized into 4. We have physical risks. So when we are looking at physical risk, these are the physical damage or physical effects that can happen due to climate change. So for example, where we have as a entity, you have property in a drought-prone area, in a flood-prone area like Chimanimani, what are you thinking about? Because that is a real risk that you're sitting at. What percentage of your portfolio is sitting in such an environment? And what are you doing about it to manage against that risk? We also have transition risks. These are basically what the Gen Zs call FOMO. Fear of missing out, risk of missing out. Transition risks are the risks of staying behind when everyone else is moving ahead. When electrical cars started, no one thought that they would last. People were thinking we need to hear our Rumpa Papa and electric cars don't do that, so probably they won't have a market. But if you look now at a lot of these big car manufacturers, they are now going towards making these hybrid cars to balance out the fuel and the electricity. Because this is where the wave is going. This is where sustainable development is going, and no one wants to be left behind. We have liability risks as well. As PAB, I did mention that we have adopted the sustainability standards. And this is not a matter of saying, please be nice, just use the standards. This is a matter of law. It's an SI. We all know how much power SIs have. It's a law which has to be followed. So if you are in the categories of the entities that are supposed to mandatorily adopt these standards, if you then don't, it comes with negative consequences. Down here, cancel culture has not really come through, but I believe it is coming through, where you will face challenges just by engaging in practices that are not environmentally friendly. You will receive a lot of backlash on Twitter. I remember some time back there was a popular brand which makes Millie Meal. And someone started a rumor on Twitter that their Millie Meal, they were using maize that was genetically modified. And that had a serious impact on their business. So it's very important to move along with this wave because, we all know what a bad reputation can do to an entity. Socioeconomic risks are obvious. Where we have climate risks that are affecting the country, it's inevitable that even the people around us are also affected. Our employees are affected by this. Are we thinking about that in our organizations? Value chains are also affected. Where you got your raw materials somewhere in Masvingo, these people are now being affected by drought. What impact does it have? So there are a myriad of risks that are associated with climate change that we need to be on the lookout for, that we need to be watching. I did say that we are what could go wrong people, but there are also a lot of opportunities that come through because of climate change. Some of these opportunities include resource efficiency. We know that, or I know that, going green is expensive. They say even going on a diet and eating healthy is for rich people. because it's expensive. For some reason, I don't know why vegetables are more expensive than meat, but it is what it is. But the benefits going forward are, I would say, they outweigh the costs. Because once you, for example, we have some companies in Zimbabwe which have decided to go off the grid, who are now creating their own electricity via solar farms, etc. Yeah, they'll just hear on the news that Fungai one is down, but it will not affect them. And the efficiency that they get in their processes are huge. A lot of the entities now are relying on machines, robotics in their production processes. And some of those processes cannot afford a 5-minute power cut. And so the moment you invest in this, you have serious efficiencies in the use of your resources. This climate change has also brought about opportunities to create new products and services. There are certain things that we never thought can be sold back then, like sorghum, umfuweshio. It was just one of those that we kept at home, and it was for the old people. But now it is getting top dollar. If you just add value to it, you can really get a lot of money from it. We spoke about electric vehicles. We spoke about solar panels. Those are new products that have come through as a result of climate change. Another opportunity is if your business is adhering to these issues, there are options for financing and subsidies. I know a number of banks locally. Before they give you a loan, they want to know what you're doing about ESG. So already, by complying and by looking at these things in your business, you have an upper hand in terms of getting financing. Stakeholder loyalty, customer loyalty, it goes without saying. I gave the example of the maize mill that was being made. And people were moving because of that. But when your customers are aware and they trust what you're doing in terms of making sure that you're going green, you can get a lot of loyalty through that. So why is this important as a strategic priority for any organization? So if you embrace all those opportunities that I spoke about, there is an opportunity for you to grow your business and expand on your products, etc. Investors become confident in your organization. If you're an organization, for example, like Border Timbers, which deals in timber and trees, they want to know, once all these trees that we have currently have been cut down, what are we going to do after that? So it's very important for us to make sure that we maintain investor confidence by placing climate resilience as a strategic priority. I spoke about the regulation. It's very important that we adhere, because the opposite is not so nice. I did speak of fear of missing out. You don't want to miss out on this wave. And as Zimbabwe, we are not going to miss out on this wave in terms of adhering and going where it is sustainable. So how does this process go? We look at the risk, what could go wrong. We look at how do we adapt. And we look at how do we then grow from this. But it starts with knowing what those risks are. So there are a number of frameworks globally, these are not exhaustive, that help in looking at these risks and coming up with a resilience and renewal process. We have GRI, we have the SASB standards, we have the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, we have integrated reporting, and we have IFRS sustainability standards. These are the different frameworks, some of the different frameworks that are there. And if you're to look at it, they look at different aspects of sustainability. For example, the integrated reporting framework looks more on the 6 capitals of a business. The SASB standards look at industry-specific issues in terms of sustainability. So, as from a PAB perspective, we have adopted the IFRS sustainability standards. And as I'm going to just explain further, they almost try to make sure that all aspects are looked at that are covered in many of those standards. They are related to the SASB standards and to the Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures. So what are some of these disclosures that are required by the IFRS sustainability standards? So at the moment, there's IFRS S1 and S2. IFRS S1 looks at the general framework of reporting these sustainability issues. S2 focuses on climate-related disclosures. And so since I'm speaking about climate-related, I will be referring more to what S2 requires in terms of disclosures of sustainability. And these disclosures are not just an accounting thing that we have to do. There was an argument to say, accountants, you're just so boggled down on standards. But it's not about the standards, it's about what the standards are communicating. And these disclosures, they cause an entity to really think about everything related to its ESG, what's the word? Yeah, that. The whole process around ESG in terms from identifying the risk to how to deal with it at the end. So these standards, they provide a framework for any entity to be able to deal with whatever sustainability issues that are affecting that entity. So the first thing is on governance. The standards require us to disclose what we are doing as part of our governance structures to deal with sustainability issues. Do you have appropriate board committees? Do you have an ESG champion in the organization at their appropriate level? It's not sufficient to have a supervisor, by the way, because this needs to be influenced from a board level. So the standards force us to disclose on this. And the moment we disclose on this, it forces us to think about what we are doing as an entity to put adequate governance structures that support sustainability. The other area that we are supposed to disclose is on strategy. The standards need us to disclose what are we doing with our strategy in terms of climate-related risk. And they go even further to require us to do scenario analysis, where we look at what-if scenarios. In our what-if scenarios, we are obviously not going to say what if it snows in Zimbabwe because it's still a long way to go. But we know the possible scenarios that we are already facing. We have droughts, we have floods that are already happening. We have erratic rainfalls, etc. in terms of climate. It forces us to say, so what if a flood happens in an area where we have 50% of our real estate property? What is our strategy then? What are we going to do? Do we have a plan in place to either, do we have insurance? Do we have a plan to move to new premises? What if there is drought in Mashingo, where most of our raw materials come from? What is our plan B? So it really forces us to think about coming up with a strategy to manage these climate-related risks. We are also required to disclose the risks that are there. And there are a number of risks that are associated with climate change. So in terms of the risks, they are categorized into different kinds of risks. I spoke about transition risks and I spoke about physical risks. And all these are required to be disclosed. And when you're disclosing, particularly on the physical risks, you're supposed to put them into different categories. We have what are known as acute risks and what are called as chronic risks. The chronic risks are the Kariba running out of water. We have seen that happen over time. It's like a cancer. It's happening over time, and we're just there sitting and watching and wondering what is going to happen. We need to deal with that as we see the trajectory of where the climate is going. The acute ones just happen all of a sudden, but still we need to identify those and see what is material for our entity. Lastly, we are required to disclose on our metrics and targets. If we have a portfolio of real estate that is in a very flood-prone area, 70% maybe, what is our target to move out of there? What target are we looking at? And this is where we need to quantify everything that we'll be doing for the sake of our investors, for them to really understand how the entity is going to deal with these risks and whether their investments are safe. So those targets are very important and they need to be done by everyone in all areas that are material. This will give our investors confidence. This will ensure that we are foolproof against any climate-related risks. Let's take a look at some examples of local companies which have already gone onto this wave to deal with climate-related risks. So Zimplats had a problem with water. If you say Narare, you know the water wars that are there. And I believe in many of our cities, there are water problems because some of our dams just don't have the water anymore. And so Zimplats decided to come up with the water recycling process within their mill, which resulted in them saving a huge percentage of water in terms of the water that they use. They saved more than 40% of fresh water that they were using. And this has brought efficiencies. Yes, it was expensive, but it was worth it. Seedco, likewise. Back in the day, we used to boast about who had like the tallest maize cob. The one that were really tall looked like the most healthy ones. But now, because of our erratic rainfalls, because of the fact that we are drought prone. They change their things up to come with more drought-resistant varieties of seed to ensure that even if there's erratic rainfall, people will still be able to harvest. And they spent a lot in research and development to make sure that this happens. But the benefits are a lot because this is where the rest of the world is going. So from a leadership perspective, what are we meant to do? First of all, these issues on climate resilience are a boardroom issue. They start from the boardroom. It doesn't start with the employees, but from the board, from the strategy. This even includes coming up with key KPIs on these sustainability targets that would have been disclosed as a basis for bonuses. I hope you're okay with that. It's also about creating a culture. I know growing up, we've always had a culture of when you're brushing your teeth, the water is always just running. But it's a culture issue that we need to deal with. And it doesn't only happen in our homes, but in our organizations. There are some organizations that even have a serious printing culture, files and files and files of papers. Yet we're supposed to be moving away from that. So we need to create a culture from the bottom up. But it starts with the management, the board, those charged with governance, to ensure that this culture starts from the top going down and making sure that these sustainability and sustainability resilience issues start from the grassroots level so that everyone knows what we are doing. It's about making sure that as leaders of any organization, it's not about managing the change yourself, but creating in an environment that makes sure that the change happens seamlessly. In terms of collaboration, there are a number of collaboration issues that are there. In Zimbabwe, though limited, I think there are some things that we can already do that are low-hanging fruits. As private sector entities, we can collaborate amongst ourselves. We can collaborate because these issues are expensive to deal with. But you can really make an impact if people collaborate and invest towards a goal that is mutually beneficial for a number of entities to come up with to come up with strategies and solutions to some of these risks. Government and regulators also need collaboration. We have, as PAB, already adopted the sustainability standards. This is part of ensuring that our businesses in Zimbabwe can also compete at a global stage. Because there are a number of entities that already require this, investors that require this, and for us to compete at a global stage, we need to look at these items. Developmental partners as well like to do with people who are worrying about the future, who are making sure that the beef, the beef that we used to eat back then, it really tasted good. It was proper beef. Are we making sure that our grandchildren and our grandchildren's kids will still eat that beef tasting the same way. I can already tell you that Coke doesn't taste the same way anymore. But we need to make sure that we live an environment, we are sustainable so that our future generations can also enjoy what we are enjoying today. I'll end by saying the next era of leadership won't be defined by who avoided the storm, but who built stronger ships. Because the storm is coming, it's not going to go away. It is there. So we need to make sure that we are well prepared for any storm that will come. Thank you.